There are crazy Trekkies, and then there are crazy Trekkies. Here's the kind of crazy Trekkie I have to confess to being. Before I was old enough to be considered a pre-adolescent, I already had passionate Trek convictions, so strong that every once in a while I still feel a twinge of guilt for abandoning them. Okay, well, maybe not that last bit, but I certainly remember this strong conviction I had that despite what anyone might say, despite how anyone might try to change it, the fact of the matter is that the real Star Trek will always be the one we call The Next Generation. For those who don't know, that's the one that aired from 1987 to 1994. And let's not mention the fact that I was born in 1991. Now, you will get a couple of points if you try to convince me that the real Trek is actually that original series. That's the one that started when I was negative 25 years old and ran from 1966 to 1969. But hey, let's just be real for a minute. We can't call that the real Trek because that's the old Star Trek. Because it's like from before I was born. Or wait. Yeah. And then there are the weird old spin-offs. That's when we have Deep Space Nine and Voyager. And now at this point in my growth as a child, this is where there didn't yet exist that particular red-headed stepchild, which would later be called Star Trek Enterprise. It didn't yet exist for me to be able to cast suspicious sideways glances at. Wouldn't exist until it was finally launched when I was about 10. Yeah, all this is from before I was 10. You know, they say addictions work their best if you get them going before you're 10. So I guess I'm toast. So while I may be hopelessly stuck in this plasticity of the brain mold caused by my early exposure to tricorders, Trek tropes, and trippy time travel tales, I have escaped this one particular bit of the trappings of my childhood Trekkie convictions. I have escaped this one particular bit because I was corrupted. I was corrupted by watching Voyager reruns again and again on VHS during some of my most formative years, starting at around 10 and a half, I'd say. Whereas, you know, the sacred cow of The Next Generation is the real Trek, well, I had to be content with very sporadically watching just a handful of VHSs of The Next Generation from the library. At first, I held strong to my convictions that Voyager isn't the authentic Trek. But by the time I managed to get through all of classic Trek, I was a late teenager. And by that point, all my formative years had already passed, and my commitment to the exceptionalistic perspective that true Trek is TNG, well, that was kind of back in the back recesses of my mind. It wouldn't be until I was firmly grown into an adult and had nearly forgotten about Trek for 5 years plus. It was until then that I realized that Voyager had completely wormed its way into my heart. So that now, if you ask me which is the real Star Trek, it would just be lip service if I tried to give you the doctrinally correct answer. Because the honest answer would be that deep down I know now that the real Star Trek is Voyager. It's real to me. It's part of my history, and I can't get it out. And it may just be there to stay. What's interesting is that, in retrospect, thinking back on little 10-and-a-half-year-old Damien, well, 11, maybe I was 11, I don't know. But in a way, Voyager is one of the best entry points, you could say, to Star Trek for a kid out of all the 90s Trek shows. And by 90s Trek, I mean, you know, late 80s all the way through 2005 or so, which would be all of The Next Generation through to the end of Enterprise, because those are all, they really have this uniform feel of being, we'll call it 90s Trek. I don't know what else to call it. But in the latter seasons of Voyager, it's just chock full of action-adventure romps that are just as fun for 11-year-olds as for adults. So think about two-part episodes like Future's End or Unimatrix Zero. Big old action-adventure, just lots of fun. And then the warm family-like atmosphere of the crew makes it feel, well, makes it feel like it belongs in a home. And for that matter, sometimes when the show's running, I feel like if I look away from the screen, I'll be at home around my real family, you know. But even though Voyager had plenty of excitement that was perfect for an 11-year-old boy like me, it also had plenty of, let's say, true Trekkish content that would continue to challenge me as a growing young person. Just like its predecessor, The Next Generation, it raises questions about what it means to be human, about what kinds of ethical norms should be encouraged, about how crew members should treat one another, and about why certain things seem to matter more to us than other things. By the time the series ends, we have Harry Kim making that one unexpected observation. He says that basically getting home, which is the whole point of the show, right? He says that getting home isn't even that important because it's so much more important that we are on this journey together. It's the us. Of course, I'm talking about that speech he gives for the end, to the journey, But if he suggests that getting home, which is the point of the show, is not even that important, he suggests that what's important is that we're on this journey together. Well, I think that's what it means to be real Star Trek. I think real Star Trek is about humans wondering what on earth it means to be human, and humans slowly beginning to figure that out together. And of course, that's why I think Voyager counts. Now, my favorite Voyager episodes have definitely changed since I was a kid. I'm a whole lot more interested in watching Faces, let's say, and a whole lot less interested in watching Macrocosm, for sure, than I was as a kid. But it's a really nice feeling to realize that the same thing that gave me so much thrill as a kid remains significant to me today, because at root, it wasn't just some fluffy stuffing to fill the corners of boring calendar days. It was good old Trek, an artistic portrait of humanity through the lens of fiction.